Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome to Horizon Zero Dawn. Now it's been a while. This game was released back in early March, but I finally got round to putting together a video on it. Now this is by no means a review. You'll know by now that I tend not to do reviews on this channel, but what I do is play a little while and just give my thoughts and impressions on it, and this is no exception. Quite often for me, the thing that really pulls me into a game is the game world itself. Not so much the game mechanics, but just how vibrant and how rich the world is, how rich the setting is. And this really is one of the best for a very long time now. At this point you probably know the drill already, but I'll go through it very briefly anyway. You play a child at the start of the game named Aloy, and you're set in a far-flung future at the end of, well, basically everything, the end of civilization. Nothing remains. Humans are scattered more or less and live in tribes. Machines at this point rule the world, but not in typical Terminator-like fashion. In this case, it's more like animals. After a brief stint as a very young girl, in which you effectively play somewhat of a tutorial, you find yourself many years later in older form. All grown up then, and ready to face a proving, to basically try and get back into the tribe, as at this point you're an outcast with unknown heritage, or at least unknown to yourself. Now I'm a bit of a stickler for cliches in stories or media of any form. It's something I really can't put up with. Any cliches send me running a mile unless they're exceptionally well put together. Now as soon as you see Aloy's guardian there, I pretty much knew exactly what was going to happen to him at some point very early in the story. I'm assuming that if you're going to be watching this video, you're not too worried about spoilers, at least for the first couple of hours of the game. But do keep in mind that I will be spoiling certain elements as we go on, and I'm going to do that just now. So, as with seeing Aloy's father figure there, and the suspicion that something is no doubt going to happen to him to drive her further into the world, those suspicions turn out to be confirmed very early on. Personally, I find it to be a very predictable plot twist, and to be perfectly honest, it's also a somewhat unnecessary one, but there you go. Now as to the gameplay itself, it's definitely very focused on being an RPG. Now with the recent release of Mass Effect, which in effect started out to be quite a heavily laden RPG back with Mass Effect 1, on the Xbox 360, which by the way is one of my favourite games of all time, and with Mass Effect's recent descent into becoming more of a linear action shooter, and please don't shoot me for saying that, it's refreshing to see Horizon Zero Dawn retain a lot of quite strong RPG elements. Some might say it's nowhere near as deep in terms of RPG as many of the older games from past times, but in terms of recent games, I feel its depth is at least comparable to Witcher 3, and just a look at the beauty of the environments here. This is what hooks me in. I can literally just roam around for ages without actually playing anything, just taking in the sights and simply admiring the sheer beauty of the world. Now, when you're out in the wild, I've found combat to be fairly interesting. In some respects, it's quite basic, but then again, you're a hunter, and these are essentially animals that you're hunting. You get a variety of different weapons that you can use, and some of them you can use to spring traps, just as I've done with this here. It's a tripwire effectively, and luring the animal in here or your opponent will disable it, at least temporarily, at which point you can cause a fair amount of damage to it before it finally wakes back up again and starts chasing after you. So for me, the combat against these animal machine type opponents I found to be quite enjoyable. So here it's fairly action orientated, but it's also fairly stealth orientated as well. Once you're out of sight, it is possible to hide away. But combat also does have some downfalls when it comes to human opponents, and I'll get to that a little further into the video. As is traditional with games of all types like this, you do have some skills that you can upgrade as you progress through your levels, and these will aid you and assist you in your particular style of gameplay. It's not something I've spent too much time on at the moment, as I've found the game to be relatively easy enough without the need for these, but further into the game that will no doubt change somewhat. As you move around the world, you'll start noticing that the game world itself is pretty darn large. As I ultimately spent a lot of time simply roaming around and taking in the sights, as well as partaking in numerous side quests, I ultimately spent the first few hours of the game in a relatively small area of the overall map, at least by comparison to the whole thing here, which you can actually see. But even within the confines of that relatively small area, you'll see quite a lot of different environments, from massive grassy wildernesses to small forests to frozen cliff wastelands like this here. Now, from time to time, the AI does seem to act rather dumb. Just look at this character just doting around as I shoot at it, looking back, looking forth before finally wondering whether or not it should actually charge me. Now, you can increase the difficulty setting of AI, but even when you do that, what it really tends to do is to give the opponents more health points rather than to make them more intelligent. And this is glaringly obvious when you get to the human opponents. Here in one of the early large, what it could be called the city areas, you'll find a lot of life, a lot of different things going on, and you can sit around and interact and pay attention to some of the shows and other displays that are going on there, from singing to storytelling. All this sort of stuff really does bring the world alive in a very, very nice way. And again, I found that as daytime passes into nighttime, the lighting of this game engine really does excel, showing off the beauty of the world in yet a different way. Although I probably shouldn't compare this to Mass Effect, it's very difficult not to, with Mass Effect only recently having just come out. Again, you run around the areas on Mass Effect and they look quite lifeless, especially by comparison to this. And here you can see that the characters, well, they really do have quite some personality, and that comes across in spades, which is a nice touch indeed, and essential for any game for me. There is a crafting system within the game, and this proves to be pretty much essential for just about everything that you will use within the game, up to and including all your arrows. I wouldn't necessarily classify it as an in-depth crafting system, but it is an extensive one, and that's a nice touch. You can gather your components as you roam around the environment, as you roam around the countryside, and you never really find yourself spending too long seeking for anything in particular, as for the most of things are quite nearby. But then again, there are some rarer components, and those you can pick up from some of the beasts that you slay throughout the game. Now, some of these components, especially some of the rarer items, you may want to sell to the various vendors throughout the game, and they will then be able to provide you some more unique items in return. Another look at the combat for a moment here, and you can see that the old dodge mechanic is fairly extensively used. And this is a maneuver you'll probably find yourself using more and more throughout the game. Now, this is still fairly on within the game, but it's where the story really starts picking up in terms of what it means for your character's future within this world. There's a bit of a sudden jump within the plot here, and although it's expected in some ways, it happens at a rather unexpected time. And this marks a bit of change in pace for the combat, because it really is the first time that you face off against human opponents, and, well, they're not really that smart. Certainly less smart than the animal opponents that you'll be facing. Just look at this guy here, for example. Little rock in between me and him, and he has no clue how to deal with it. You'll find him still standing in the same spot there. He doesn't even try and flank me or anything like that. Bearing in mind that there's two of them there, and that they could quite easily between them make an attempt to outflank me. All they really do is simply stand there without even looking for any cover, and all I need to do is simply strafe left and right a little bit and keep getting that cover between me. These opponents seem completely unable to deal with these type of tactics, and, well, these are not advanced tactics by any means. It's simple and very basic, and it gets to the point where I can simply stand in the open here and keep shooting them. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you can change the difficulty setting, but what effect this simply has is it means the opponents deal more damage to you, and it means they have more health points. It doesn't make them smarter, it doesn't give them any more intelligence, and it doesn't make them any better equipped to deal with these type of tactics. Just look at here, this guy didn't even bother looking at me until I shot him, and then he only rolled after I'd actually done the damage. So anyway, I purchased Horizons shortly before I went on holiday, so I really haven't had the opportunity to play it anywhere near as long as I would actually like to have done at this point. Although I've actually played it quite a significant way past the point you see here, I just don't have the footage for that. Whilst the story can be a little bit cliched in a few parts, it is actually very well acted and very well put together, and the game world itself is absolutely gorgeous. So there are my very early thoughts and impressions on what I feel for Horizon Zero Dawn. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.